Hare Mukunda Goswami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishwapada Paramahansa Paripari Jai Sarada Santi Srila Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Chekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Gita Govardhana ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Srinavadri Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaivam Narotaram Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nasta Preshu Abhadyarishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. So reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 2nd chapter, text number 22. Tatasya Kankaryamalam Britano Viglapayat Changayat Ugasenam Tishtam Nisanam Parameshti Dishne Yabodaya Deva Nidarayeti Tat, therefore, Tasya, his, Kankaryam, service, Alam, of course, Britan, the servitors, Naha, us, Viglapayati, heaves pain, Anga, Ovidura, Yat, as much as, Ugrasenam, unto King Ugrasena, Tishtan, being seated, Nishanam, waiting upon him, Parameshti Dishne, on the royal throne, Yabodhayat, submitted, Deva, addressing my Lord, Nidharaya, please know it, Iti, thus. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Therefore, O Vidura, does it not pain us, his servitors, when we remember that he, Lord Krishna, used to stand before King Ugrasena, who was sitting on the royal throne, and used to submit explanations before him, saying, open quote, O my Lord, please let it be known to you, close quote, question mark. Responsively, therefore, O Vidura, does it not pain us, his servitors, when we remember that he, Lord Krishna, used to stand before King Ugrasena, who was sitting on the royal throne, and used to submit explanations before him, saying, O my Lord, please let it be known to you. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna's gentle behavior before his so-called superiors, such as his father, grandfather, and elder brother, his amiable behavior with his so-called wives, friends, and contemporaries, his behavior as a child before his mother, Yasoda, and his naughty dealings with his young girlfriends cannot bewilder a pure devotee like Uddhava. Others, who are not devotees, are bewildered by such behavior of the Lord, who acted just like a human being. This bewilderment is explained by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 9:11 as follows: Avajananti mam mudha manusham tanam ashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhutta maheshwaram. Persons with a poor fund of knowledge belittle the personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna not knowing his exalted position as the Lord of everything. I'm going to read that again. Persons with a poor fund of knowledge belittle the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, not knowing his exalted position as the Lord of everything. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord has explained his position clearly, but the demoniac atheistic student squeezes out an interpretation to suit his own purposes and misleads unfortunate followers unto the same mentality. Such unfortunate persons merely pick up some slogans from the great book of knowledge, but are unable to estimate the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pure devotees like Uddhava, however, are never misled by such atheistic opportunists. Verse again. Therefore, this is Uddhava speaking, therefore, O Vidura, does it not pain us, his servitors, when we remember that he, Lord Krishna, used to stand before King Ugrasena, who was sitting on the royal throne, and used to submit explanations before him, saying, open quote, "O my Lord, please let it be known to you," close quote, question mark. Om Agyanati Menandasya Garananjana Salakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yatkari Patarham Bande Shri Guru Dinatadane. Prabhupada writes that such unfortunate persons merely pick up some slogans from the great book of knowledge. So it has become, unfortunately, a very common practice for people to pick up slogans or statements made by Prabhupada and his followers in books like the Srimad Bhagavatam, and think that they are always true in all times and in all places. This is a form of intellectual dishonesty that has pervaded the movement and is one of the unfortunate developments that seems to happen as the society grows. What Uddhava is getting at is that it's very difficult for people to understand that Krishna can act exactly like an ordinary person. When he was a small child, sometimes he was rebuked by his mother Yashoda and cried real tears. I mean, the sannyasis have explained the difference between tears of rage and tears of devotion. That one is the tears of rage or anger are hot tears, and the tears of devotion are cool tears. I don't know how he measured the temperature, but somehow or other that's there. But Krishna, he's like the Prabhupada calls it dancers, actors in many places, because they're very similar. So Krishna played the role of a perfect son, sometimes crying, of a perfect son growing and maturing and being able to speak brokenly and then speaking more sophisticatedly. So he was playing the role of an ordinary person. But again, he was acting. It's not his true nature. He just did it perfectly. And it is said that in the Bhagavad Gita that fools deride me when I descend in this human form of life. People, because he can act so perfectly, they think that's it. That he's an ordinary person. He's acting ordinarily, so he's an ordinary person. This is the difference, in a way, in a sense, between the spiritualist and the materialist. The materialist, or the foolish, is the phrase Prabhupada uses. The foolish man doesn't recognize that Krishna is only play acting, but he's so powerful that he can act perfectly. He can cry real tears. He can act afraid, and not only act afraid, but he can be afraid. So this is misunderstood by the materialist, that he is acting. And at the same time, he's the master of the whole universe, of many universes, and he knows what everyone is thinking all the time. So this is one of the things that we know is forgotten in and amongst the residents of Braj, that Krishna, Yashoda thinks that Krishna only has her child, and sort of thinks that way, and her husband thinks that way too. because he's acting perfectly, and not but it's a drama, but it's a real life drama. It's something that happens that we have to take note of, and therefore it's known as achintya, or inconceivable. Sometimes Prabhupada writes that Chintya Veda Tattva, Veda Tattva is inconceivable. Achintya Veda Tattva. Well, his mastery over many universes and his ability to know what we're thinking at all times, of the many billions of human beings on this planet and many billions of human beings on other planets, are thinking many things, and Krishna knows exactly what we are thinking. At the same time, he can act like an ordinary person. And people who are unbelievers, who are we might call them the enemies of Krishna, or the materialists, think that's it, that Krishna is an ordinary, real person. Prabhupada mentions here that there's a perpetual sort of conflict between the personalists and the impersonalists, and he signifies that even though we are sort of lulling ourselves into a false sense of security and celebrating our 50 years of existence, there's a lot of enemies out there. I know that there's a lot of them even listening to this lecture, maybe in other parts of the world, but they're simply what we call fault finders. I mean, I may make a mistake, I may say something that's overly controversial, but it's going to go viral. So one has to be careful about what one says, even in the temple. It's being microphoned, but it's being broadcast not only to Murwillumbah, but in places like Egypt and Croatia and Russia and all over the place. So in a sense, it's good because everyone can take advantage of hearing about the Krishna consciousness movement and what it purports to be true, but at the same time, there is some danger, and it's sort of like that with everything material. Like the use of microphones, for example. Like now, the microphone is being used to spread Krishna consciousness, so it's being used in a good way. But most of the time, microphones are being used to get people to like music that's just totally obnoxious, in my opinion. I mean, it's loud drumming and loud singing and screechy voice. When I was staying in Govardhan, old Govardhan, the proper Govardhan, not that this is improper, but there was a wedding taking place, and in that part of the world, the weddings sometimes start at midnight, and this one was starting at midnight. And it was broadcast through large speakers that are sort of like Tibetan foghorns or ship foghorns, those great big long speakers. And some of the local people complained to the local police that it was just impossible to get any sleep because and the person who was singing sounded like his entrails were being ripped out by a Rottweiler, like a dog. I mean, it was not pleasant lullabies. It was definitely screeching and obnoxious. So what happened was the police came and they told them to turn the volume down significantly so people could get some sleep. But then after about, I don't know, half an hour or something like that, they left and the volume was switched back up to the former loud, obnoxious level. And I was trying to sleep and I was putting different kinds of earplugs in my ears and nothing was happening. Then I couldn't get any sleep. And this was happening, about a quarter of a mile away. But that's the situation. They thought that what was happening there was something that should be told to the whole world through loudspeaker systems, and it didn't matter if local people couldn't get any sleep. That was just part of the game. So there's always these kind of inimical, outrageously loud and outrageously vocal and angry people. They think that because of advances in medicine and communication and travel, that everything is actually getting better. And I'm subscribed to a magazine called Wired. Wired was a magazine to promote the technology of the internet and things like that. And lately it's become sort of a very well-written and very carefully written proponent of materialism. And you can tell by the advertising, and I don't even read it anymore. I mean, I get it because I wanted to find out what was going on, but after a while it gets very, very boring because it's all about the same thing. It's about how great everything is and how wonderful it is, and how the cigarette companies are doing away with smoke, and some of them are saying that we're going to have smoke-free cigarettes within 10 years or something like that, as if that's any better, because it's a kind of vapor, and we don't know what's in that vapor, but we think that it must be toxic, just like smoke, and creates like a lot of bad things like cancer and so forth and so on. So there's a lot of enemies out there, even though we've kind of thinking that in 50 years we can celebrate that we've made a lot of advances. We've gone all over the world. We've convinced people, a lot of people, thousands of people, to give up the materialistic way of life. But the enemies are still out there, and they're still going very strong, and they're increasing. So one of the things that I think endeared Prabhupada's early followers to him was the fact that he wasn't sort of seeing the world through optimistic, rose-colored glasses. Everything is perfect and fine, everything is getting better. He knew that there was a lot of animosity, just like he mentions here, that there's a lot of a perpetual conflict between impersonalism. I mean, it's right in the place where Krishna consciousness is growing, that there's a conflict between impersonalists and personalists. Impersonalists think that the highest form of realization is the fact that there is a great single entity that doesn't have any personality out there, and we can become part of it, and we can merge, and that's what most people think about the spiritual movement, that the highest form of realization is to become one with the great power that exists, whether it's a power of love or the power of feeling good or the power of anything. But there's no personality there. There's no acting. There's no real tears. It's all just a big, powerful nothing that we can become part of. And that's what most people think of when they think of spiritual life and when they think of God. That God is either love or beautiful nature, or warmth, or good food, or whatever, or friendliness, or cleanliness. But according to what Uddhava is saying, the God is much more than that. He's not only the controller of the whole cosmic situation, all the universes, but can act perfectly like an ordinary person. And one of the things about Krishna is that he grew, and his manifestations of growth are completely explained, how he has different features of hair on his body, and he grows like an ordinary person, but he's not an ordinary person. So it's difficult to ascertain actually who or what Krishna is, and therefore he is known as Achintya, or the impossible. And it's impossible once, as Prabhupada mentions, once one begins Krishna consciousness or takes initiation from Krishna consciousness, to leave it. Even though sometimes people, they leave the movement, they in one way or another, they disappear, or they vanish, or they become very enamored with materialistic life. There's different ways that Krishna, or they leave frontline activity, and but leaving is not everything. There's a nice story. I think Krishna Bhakti will correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, she had a ticket once that had expired on Singapore Airlines, and she thought, well, I'll just try to see if I can talk with someone at Singapore Airlines, and they will find out if I can still use this ticket, even though it had expired. So they got to talking, and as Sridhama explained to me, your husband, that somehow or other Jayapataka's name came up, because they're both disciples of Jayapataka Maharaj, And he's flown so many miles on Singapore Airlines that as soon as his name came up, it changed the whole tenor of the conversation. That he was not someone who had, achieved sort of platinum or gold or whatever the airline status is, but he had attained the status of a celebrity. And so the conversation became very amiable, and she was able to use this expired ticket because of Jai Pataka. Is that correct? Is that what happened? And she's nodding. So that's not a made-up story. It's a true incident. It happens. So what I'm getting at is that people there's different levels of. It's never been defined, and I mentioned this in one of my lectures. What a member of ISKCON is. Like if you're a member of an airline, you can be a silver member, you can be a gold member, you can be a platinum member, and you get different colors of membership cards if you go through the hierarchy of flying so many miles. So a member of Krishna consciousness is not just someone who preaches Krishna consciousness, but it can be an elderly person who stays at home and just worships the deities and doesn't have any outward sort of preaching going on. That's still a member of ISKCON because that person believes in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. That person states that he or she proudly states that he is a member of Krishna consciousness. So he's not left the movement. There was a television program. It was a kind of a follow-up of the 60 Minutes program, and I remember they interviewed people like Ramai Swami, and he remembers it, and they were trying to find out what had become of the young Krishna conscious devotees from the program that had existed 30 years ago or something like that. And it was a kind of a big turning point in our image of Krishna, what people thought of Krishna, and they made it look like that at least one of the people who had left the movement. It was a lady, wasn't any longer in the movement, and she was now visiting bars, which it was all kind of like made up because it wasn't really true. They made it look like these people had left the movement and they were no longer following it. But Prabhupada has said that even if we leave the movement, if we don't complete the process of full devotional, in our next birth we get an opportunity to become a human being, and we take up right where we left off. So we can lament, and it is lamentable when people seem to sort of disappear, but they don't exactly disappear. There's still Krishna consciousness in their thinking, and that thinking may be able to resurface when in a future birth. So this is one of the special mercies of Krishna, that even though we abandon the Krishna consciousness movement in one way or another, and sometimes it's due to old age or invalidity, and it's not possible. But the result is that we can be reborn in a Brahminical family or a devotee family or a wealthy family, enabling us to take up where we left off, to continue our Krishna consciousness. So there's no such thing as really leaving. We talk about people leaving the movement, but in another sense, in a deeper sense, there's no such thing. So I'll probably have to stop about this at this point and ask if there's anything to say, any questions or mistakes that I have made, inevitably. Please ask or comment. There's one.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the class. My thoughts are, yes, there's many people that are in ISKCON, like ISKCON, but sometimes they have their feet in other places as well. And I was just wondering, are they still, it's still okay to engage, do you understand what I mean? They're in other temples or they've got other teachers besides ISKCON. So, but yet they still want service and to be connected. So I'm just wondering what your view is on how to engage these people that aren't fully ISKCON, that they've got feet in both or two different parties. There's some people that have different teachers, but yet they still love ISKCON.
Well, I think that we all learn to love everybody.
Yes.
whether they're in ISKCON or they're outside of ISKCON, or whether they're followers of somebody else or another religion, or part of the Vedic religion that's not part of our religion. But because we understand that they'll have an opportunity to be Krishna conscious, maybe not immediately, but in a future birth, we have an attitude to encourage them, even though maybe sometimes we're kind of distant. But the feeling of love is always there for everybody, even if they leave the Krishna consciousness movement. So that's knowing that philosophy is there, that nobody is rejected. So we maintain I think one should maintain a friendly attitude.
Just this incident came up with me just recently, and it's a second generation, and they actually even initiated in ISKCON, but they've taken on another teacher, and they feel rejected for taking on another teacher. So I just said, you have to make your choice of where you're going with your life, but ISKCON is a little bit firm on boundaries as well. So
well, we recite every morning that one shouldn't commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting, and so it's very easy to commit that offense, and it's very easy to commit other offenses, many other offenses. But at the same time, people, if they're unable to come back in this lifetime, they can come back in a future lifetime. So we may have to keep our distance, but we have to know that it's not the end of everything. That it's just everything has begun. Their spiritual life has begun, even though it's not active. And I think that in future there's a lot of kerfuffle or commotion between people that left the movement and Prabhupada's godbrothers who purported another philosophy. But that seems to have diminished a lot. I mean, there's bans and hatred and all that sort of thing, but that seems to have evaporated to some degree. And I think that that I think it happens in Christianity that they've published books. I've seen such books of Christians who are not Roman Catholics. There may be something else. They're still Catholics, or they're still Christians, but they're not necessarily Roman Catholics. So in these little books, and I think the people who are privy to these or followers of these other faiths are also able to read these books and to edit them and to give their perspective on it. So it becomes something of an intellectual conversation rather than a conflict. So I think that's kind of what the Krishna conscious philosophy is. It's not really about right and wrong, black and white, good or bad, but it's a very deep philosophy, and it's a philosophy that people may reject at some point, but they can come back to it. So I don't think that it's a good idea to totally reject anyone. That's my opinion. Anyways, it's a little.
Sorry, one question about relating to that. So, for example, because there's a lot of things said about Prabhupada said that you should not associate with other mats, right? Like, for example, if you would come together for a kirtan, is that how much do you dissociate or associate?
Well, there's different kinds of kirtans. There's kirtans by people who smoke marijuana. There's kirtans by people who drink wine. There's kirtans by people who have illicit sex. So we have to be a little careful. I mean, not everyone is equal. I mean, there are people that do commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting, and so maybe they'll. I mean, like with a person who is new, for example, very new to Krishna consciousness for the first time, they're going to be breaking regulated principles. They're going to be having illicit sex and eating meat and having girlfriends and boyfriends and having intoxication. It's inevitable. But after they're initiated and they take vows that they're going to give these things up, we think that they should follow those vows. And if they don't follow them, they're still not to be classified as persona non grata, or people that we reject outwardly, because maybe after a while they'll stop doing these sinful activities, even not, if not in this lifetime, in some lifetime. So we have to as Prabhupada taught us by his behavior, we have to love everyone, even though they're sometimes they become envious snakes. Yes, Kishori?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for the class. I just wanted to ask, so in this purport, it's that a pure devotee never gets bewildered, and a pure devotee can understand Krishna despite him being submissive to elders and loving with his girlfriends, despite whatever human behavior he displays. The question I have is, so for when we preach, like when we go out and be trying to encourage people to become devotees, these people, and in the purport it's actually said that a little fund of knowledge and the demoniac they distort. But how can we sort of present Krishna? Like, what are some of the strategies we can use so that people don't become offensive? Like, because even right from the beginning, people can be like, oh, but he had so many girlfriends. Like, things like that. What are some of the strategies that you might use or that you have found have worked to make Krishna's behavior? Like, we know that he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he can do so many different things, and it's not on the same platform. But yeah, like when we preach, how can we kind of break that barrier?
I think people tend to join Krishna consciousness because the food is good, the place is clean, the people are friendly, the music is wonderful. I mean, there's everything that's desirable. But after a while, people realize that to get to that point of being happy and dancing and chanting, that you have to undergo certain austerities. You have to give up illicit sex. You have to give up drinking and meat eating and gambling and illicit sex. So it's not so. The glitter wears off after a while. The honeymoon is over, so to speak. But people who are devoted, they will undergo they'll undertake these austerities willingly. And it's not just the cleanliness and the happiness and the good music and the camaraderie. It's a philosophy. It's a very deep philosophy, and it's a philosophy that has many sides to it. And it's a very sophisticated philosophy. It's not something that you can just say that I'm a devotee now and everything is beautiful. There's a lot of inimical things going on, and the reason that we recite these offenses every day is because we have to know that we're walking a kind of razor's edge, that we can be friendly to people, but at the same time we have to know that maybe, especially if they're initiated, maybe they're making a mistake. But there's always a chance, as Krishna's always merciful and Lord Chaitanya is always very merciful, that they will come back, that they will give up their sinful activities. At least that's our hope. And we never give up that hope, even though preaching is kind of a thankless task. We may, and Rupa Raghunath will notice, maybe we'll meet 100 people, and out of those 100 people, one person only will accept a book and be friendly, and but that's life. So preaching Krishna consciousness is not a picnic. It's not easy, but it's not a walk in the park. It's not. But it's something that we undergo. It's an austerity that we think is important.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. So, unless there's something else, I think we'll stop there. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada had said, Maharaj, that we're open. Srila Prabhupada had said we've opened to all classes of men, and that some in mode of goodness, some in ignorance, some in passion. We are to be connected to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and deliver it as such, and that's it. We can't be the world of how many people stay, how many people go. We can only present it according to how far we understand. And many people, it's open to all. We're going to get ruffians and the like come and join the movement. It's just a matter of bringing them into the fold and seeing how the purification works on that individual. It's not really up to us, other than to present it best we can. Just a comment.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.